Hello, everyone. I want to tell you about the day I found 3 people walking backward in the Appalachian wilderness at 2 o'clock. They weren't running, nor were they stumbling. They were walking in perfect order, deliberately, their eyes open but seeing nothing. The strangest part was that 6 weeks earlier, they had been reported missing from 3 different states. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Share your thoughts on the story in the comments section. Your opinions are very valuable to us. My name is David Cole, and I've been a forest ranger in the Nantahala National Forest of North Carolina for 16 years. When people think of forest rangers, they imagine someone who gives directions to lost hikers or puts out campfires. Someone who spends their days enjoying nature and helping tourists find their way back to the parking lot. But the reality is darker, much darker. We're the first responders when civilization ends and wilderness begins. We're the ones who find the bodies. We're the ones who pull drowning victims from rivers. We're the ones who know the statistics the Park Service doesn't share with the public. The numbers they keep quiet because they don't want people to know just how many hikers vanish every single year on the Appalachian Trail. And I'm the one who stumbled onto the backwards hikers. Before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand something about the Nantahala. The name comes from a Cherokee word meaning land of the noonday sun. The gorges here are so deep, so dark, that sunlight only reaches the bottom at midday. It's beautiful country, some of the most stunning wilderness on the East Coast. But it's also unforgiving. The trails are steep, the weather changes without warning, and cell service is non-existent for most of our section. When something goes wrong out here, you're on your own, and things go wrong more often than you'd think. It was October 17th, 2022. The kind of crisp autumn night where your breath fogs in front of your face and the forest sounds carry for miles. The temperature had dropped into the high 30s, and a light frost was already forming on the exposed patches of grass along the forest roads. I was on a routine night patrol, something we do twice a week during peak hiking season, which runs from March through October. The Appalachian Trail cuts directly through our section of the Nantahala, and we'd had reports of illegal camping near the shelters and some minor vandalism at Sassafras Gap. Nothing major, just the usual knucklehead stuff, teenagers drinking beer and carving their initials into the shelter walls. I'd started my patrol at midnight, like always. Checked the parking areas first, making sure no one had broken into the cars left overnight by through hikers. Then I'd driven the perimeter roads, looking for campfires in unauthorized areas. By 1:30 a.m., I was ready to call it a night. The thermos of coffee I'd brought was empty, and my eyes were getting heavy. Just one more pass along Forest Service Road 67, then I could head back to the station and finish my shift doing paperwork. Forest Service Road 67 is a narrow, winding dirt road that parallels the Appalachian Trail for about 12 miles. It's technically closed to public vehicles, but we use it for emergency access and patrol. The road is barely wide enough for one vehicle, with thick forest pressing in on both sides. During the day, it's beautiful, sunlight filtering through the canopy, birds singing. At night, it's oppressive. Your headlights only penetrate maybe 50 feet ahead, and beyond that, it's just darkness. Pure, complete darkness. I was driving slowly, maybe 15 miles per hour, windows cracked so I could hear if anyone was calling for help. That's when I checked my watch. 1:47 a.m. I remember thinking that I'd be back at the station by 2:15, home by 3, and in bed by 3:30. Then I could sleep until noon and forget about the forest for a few hours. That's when my headlights caught something. 3 figures walking in single file, on the trail, right where it intersected with the forest road. At first, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. You don't expect to see anyone out here at this hour. The shelters are miles away and no one hikes at night. The risks are too high. You can't see roots or rocks, you could step off a cliff, encounter a bear, get completely disoriented. Any experienced hiker knows you make camp before dark and start again at first light. But these three were hiking, or at least they were moving. And as I slowed my vehicle to a stop, my headlights illuminating them fully, I realized something was very wrong. They were moving too slowly, too deliberately. Their pace was mechanical, rhythmic, like they were counting steps in their heads. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Perfect cadence, perfect spacing between them, about 6 feet separating each person from the next. And they were walking in the wrong direction. No, that's not right. Let me be more specific because this detail is important. They weren't just heading south when they should have been heading north, or vice versa. They were literally walking backwards. Facing south, moving north, their backs to the direction they were traveling. I sat there in my truck for a solid 10 seconds just watching them through the windshield, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My first thought was drugs. Maybe they'd eaten some mushrooms they'd found in the forest, gotten high, and were stumbling around disoriented. We get that sometimes, usually with younger hikers who think they're communing with nature or finding themselves or whatever. But drugged hikers don't move with that kind of precision. They stumble, they weave, they fall down. These three were walking with the kind of coordination you'd see in trained soldiers marching in formation. My second thought was a prank. Maybe they were YouTubers or TikTokers filming some kind of stunt. Walking the Appalachian Trail backwards challenge, or something equally stupid. The internet had made my job significantly harder over the years. Every idiot with a camera phone thinks they need to do something dangerous and film it for views. But if this was a prank, where were the cameras? Where was the support crew? And why would they do it at 2 a.m. in freezing temperatures? I turned off my engine and grabbed my flashlight from the passenger seat. The cold hit me the second I opened the door. I could see my breath immediately, thick clouds of vapor in the beam of my headlight. The temperature had dropped even further. I'd guess it was around 35 degrees now, maybe lower with the wind chill. I also grabbed my radio and clipped it to my belt. Protocol dictates that you always call in unusual encounters before approaching, but I hesitated. How do you call in 3 people walking backwards? Jenkins was working the overnight desk at the ranger station, and he was the kind of guy who'd never let me live it down if I radioed in something that turned out to be nothing. I could already hear him laughing, making jokes about it for the next 6 months. So I decided to approach first and call it in if I needed backup. I stepped out of the vehicle. The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing through the silent forest. The 3 figures didn't react, didn't turn, didn't even pause, just kept walking backwards, steady and mechanical. I clicked on my flashlight and started walking towards them. My boots crunched on the frost-covered leaves that littered the forest road. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Loud in the stillness. The hikers still didn't react. "Hey there," I called out, keeping my voice friendly but firm. I've learned over the years that tone matters. You don't want to scare people, but you also need to project authority. "Forest Service, you folks okay?" No response, not even a head turn. They just kept walking backwards, their arms swinging naturally at their sides, their steps measured and even, like they'd been doing this their entire lives. I jogged to catch up with them. My breath came harder, visible in the cold air. As I got closer, details started to emerge in my flashlight beam, details that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. All 3 were dressed in proper hiking gear. Modern, expensive stuff. The woman in front was wearing a North Face jacket, bright red, with a large Osprey backpack, the kind that costs $300. Behind her, the younger man had on a Columbia fleece and technical hiking pants. The older man at the back wore a distinctive olive green Patagonia jacket. These weren't casual day hikers. This was serious equipment, the kind you invest in for long-distance trekking, but their clothes were destroyed. Absolutely filthy. The woman's jacket was torn at the shoulder, exposing the white insulation underneath. It was covered in mud, dark stains that could have been dirt or blood or both. Her pants were shredded at the knees. The younger man's fleece was ripped down the side, and I could see scratches on his arms underneath. The older man's jacket had what looked like burn marks on the sleeves. They looked like they'd been living in the woods for weeks, maybe months. "Excuse me," I said louder, moving faster to get ahead of them. "I need you to stop, please. Sir, ma'am, can you hear me?" Still nothing, no acknowledgement at all. They were about 20 feet away from me now, close enough that I could hear their breathing. It was steady, rhythmic, matching their footsteps. In and out, mechanical. I positioned myself directly in their path, about 10 feet ahead of them. Surely they'd stop now. They'd have to stop. You can't just walk into a person. That's when I finally saw their faces clearly, and my stomach dropped. Their eyes were open, wide open, staring straight ahead, which meant they were staring backwards, since they were walking backwards. But there was nothing in those eyes, no awareness, no recognition, no fear or confusion or anger. It was like looking at mannequins, like looking at corpses with their eyes open. The woman was maybe late 30s with dark hair pulled back in a matted ponytail. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones prominent, lips cracked and bleeding. Behind her, the younger man looked even worse. Early 20s, I'd guess, with a scraggly beard and hollow cheeks. His eyes were sunken deep into his skull. The older man at the back was maybe 50s, with gray stubble and skin that looked almost yellow in my flashlight beam. They looked like cancer patients, like people who'd been starving for weeks. And they didn't stop. They just kept walking, directly toward me. I had to step aside or they would have walked right into me. Not through me, but into me. They would have collided with my chest and kept pushing forward with that same mechanical rhythm, like walking into a wall wouldn't even register in whatever state they were in. "Sir, ma'am, I'm with the Forest Service," I said, moving alongside them now, keeping pace with their backwards walk. "You need to stop right now. This isn't safe. You could walk right off a cliff doing this." Nothing, not even a blink. Their eyes remained fixed on whatever they were seeing in the darkness behind them, or not seeing. I couldn't tell which was worse. I made a decision. I reached out and grabbed the woman's shoulder. Gently, but firmly, just enough contact to get her attention. The moment my hand made contact, all three of them stopped, in perfect unison, like someone had pressed a pause button on a video. Their feet froze mid-step. Their arms stopped swinging. Even their breathing seemed to synchronize, pausing for just a fraction of a second before resuming that same steady rhythm. But they still didn't turn around, didn't look at me, just stood there facing backwards into the darkness of the trail they'd come from. Three statues in the middle of the forest. My radio crackled, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I'd accidentally keyed it when I reached out, my thumb hitting the button on my belt. "Cole, you copy? Everything okay out there?" It was Jenkins, and his voice sounded tinny and distant through the radio speaker. The overnight desk at the ranger station was probably warm right now. Probably had fresh coffee brewing. Probably didn't have 3 catatonic hikers standing in front of him. I lifted the radio with my free hand, keeping my other hand on the woman's shoulder. I was afraid if I let go, they'd start walking again. "Jenkins, I've got a situation at mile marker 847. 3 individuals, acting strange. I'm going to need backup and possibly medical." There was a pause. I could hear Jenkins typing on his keyboard. "Strange how? How do you explain this? How do you put into words what I was seeing?" 3 people walking backwards through the forest at 2 a.m., their eyes empty, their bodies emaciated, their clothes destroyed. Just send backup now and call County EMS. Tell them to stage at the Forest Service Road 67 gate. I'll meet them there with the subjects. Copy that. ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I looked at the 3 frozen hikers. Their chests were rising and falling. They were breathing. They were alive. But something was fundamentally wrong. Something beyond my training, beyond my experience, beyond anything I'd ever encountered in 16 years of being a ranger. "Can you hear me?" I asked, moving to stand directly in front of the woman. I was maybe 2 feet from her face now. I could see every detail. Her eyes were hazel, I noticed, light brown with flecks of green. Pretty eyes, the kind that probably lit up when she smiled. But now they were completely empty. No light, no recognition, no presence. I waved my hand in front of her face. Nothing. No tracking movement. No pupil dilation. No reflexive blink. It was like waving your hand in front of a painting. I checked her pulse at her neck. Steady, maybe 60 beats per minute. Normal resting heart rate. Her skin was cold, but that made sense given the temperature. She was alive. Physically, everything seemed normal, but mentally, I had no idea where she was. Then, without any warning, all 3 of them started walking again, backwards, right past me. Their synchronized movement broke, and they resumed that mechanical march, heading north on the trail with their faces pointed south. "Stop! This is not safe." I moved in front of them again, and again they stopped in perfect unison, like I'd pressed that pause button again. I needed answers. I needed to document this. I pulled out my phone and took photos of each of them. The camera flash was harsh in the darkness, and in that split second of illumination, they looked even more disturbing. Like actors in a horror movie, frozen mid-scene, like wax figures in a museum. The flash reflected off their empty eyes, creating that red-eye effect you get in photos, making them look demonic. That's when I noticed something else. The woman's backpack. It was a bright red Osprey pack, probably a 65-liter model, the kind serious thru-hikers use for multi-week trips. And hanging from one of the straps was a small keychain, a tiny stuffed bear with Tennessee embroidered on it in white thread. The kind of souvenir you pick up at a gas station or visitor center. I'd seen missing persons bulletins, lots of them. It's part of the job. Every week, Jenkins prints out a stack of them from the National Park Service database, and we're supposed to familiarize ourselves with recent cases. I'm not going to lie and say I memorize every face, but some details stick with you, and something about that keychain triggered a memory. I pulled out my phone again and opened the National Missing Persons Database app. Yes, we have an app for that. It's connected to the National Crime Information Center, updates in real time, and it saved my ass more times than I can count. You'd be surprised how many people reported missing turn up disoriented on hiking trails, unable to remember their own names. I scrolled through recent cases, using the filters to narrow it down. Hiking in the activity field. Appalachian Trail in the location field. Last 90 days in the date range. 47 results. Jesus Christ. 47 people reported missing on the AT in the last 3 months. Most of them probably turned up eventually, found their way back, or got picked up by local law enforcement. But some didn't. Some never came home. I scrolled through the faces, looking for a match, and then I found her. Ellie Mitchell, age 37. Height, 5 feet 6 inches. Weight, 140 pounds. Brown hair, hazel eyes. Last seen September 3, 2022, at the Fontana Dam Shelter in Tennessee, which is about 65 miles south of where we were standing. She was through hiking the AT northbound, a journey she'd started in Georgia back in April. According to the report, she'd been documenting her hike on social media, posting daily updates and photos. She'd called her sister from the Fontana Dam shelter saying she was in good spirits and planning to make it through the Smokies within a week. She never did. Her sister reported her missing on September 10th, when Ellie missed their scheduled check-in call. That was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks of searches, of helicopters flying over the mountains, of search and rescue teams combing the trails. 6 weeks of her family hoping, praying, posting her photo on every social media platform they could find. And here she was, walking backwards through the forest at 2 a.m. I looked at the date on my phone, October 17th. That meant she'd been missing for 44 days, and judging by the state of her clothes and her physical condition, she'd spent most of those days out here in the wilderness. But doing what? Walking backwards? I looked at the younger man next. His face was harder to place. The scraggly beard obscured most of his features, and his face was so gaunt that it changed his entire appearance. But I noticed a tattoo on his forearm, visible where his torn sleeve had ridden up. A compass rose, beautifully detailed, with coordinates underneath. I took a close-up photo of the tattoo and zoomed in on my phone screen. The coordinates were specific: 35.5175 degrees north, 83.5345 degrees west. I recognized those numbers. That's Fontana Lake, right near the dam. Same area where Ellie Mitchell was last seen. I pulled up the Missing Persons app again, this time filtering for tattoo in the identifying marks field. I scrolled through maybe a dozen results before I found him. Tyler Crowley, age 23, height 5 feet 10 inches, weight 165 pounds, black hair, brown eyes, distinctive tattoo on left forearm, compass rose with coordinates of Fontana Lake. Last seen September 8, 2022, at the Nantahala Outdoor Center. The NOC is literally 15 miles from where we were standing right now. According to the report, Tyler had been doing a section hike with 3 friends from college. They'd been having a great time, moving at a good pace, planning to finish their section in 5 days. On day 3, Tyler told his friends he wanted to push miles and would meet them at the next shelter, about 12 miles north. He was an experienced hiker, had done several long-distance trails before. His friends weren't worried. He never showed up at the shelter. His friends waited for him until the next day, then hiked back down the trail looking for him. Nothing. No sign. No torn clothing. No blood. No indication of what had happened. It was like he'd evaporated. That was 5 weeks ago. 35 days. My hands were shaking now, and it wasn't from the cold. 2 missing persons, both last seen in the same general area, both missing for over a month, both standing in front of me walking backwards through the forest. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. The older man was harder to identify. No visible tattoos, no distinctive jewelry, but his jacket caught my attention. That olive-green Patagonia had a custom patch on the sleeve, and when I moved my flashlight closer I could make out the design. It was a caduceus, the medical symbol, with text around it that I couldn't quite read in the darkness. I took a photo of the patch and zoomed in. The text said, "Volunteer Medical Support, Appalachian Trail." My stomach dropped. I called Jenkins again, my thumb fumbling with the radio button. "Jenkins, run a search for me. Missing persons, medical background, Appalachian Trail, last 60 days, white male, approximately 55 to 60 years old." That's pretty specific, Cole. What's going on out there? Jenkins sounded more alert now, less bored. He could probably hear the tension in my voice. "Just do it, please. This is important. I heard typing on the other end. The 3 hikers had started walking again, and I had to jog to keep up with them. They were heading north on the trail, moving at that same steady pace, maybe 2 miles per hour. Slow, but consistent. Relentless. "Got one possible match," Jenkins said, after what felt like an eternity. Dr. Robert Hendricks, age 58, from Charlottesville, Virginia, reported missing September 1st near the Georgia-North Carolina border. Says here he was a cardiologist, recently retired, volunteering medical services for thru-hikers. Spent his summers at Trail Angels houses treating blisters, checking blood pressure, that sort of thing. Went out for a day hike to check on some hikers he'd treated the week before. Never came back. His car was found at the trailhead 3 days later. September 1st. 7 weeks ago. 46 days. "Send me everything you have on all three," I said, my voice barely steady. Ellie Mitchell, Tyler Crowley, and Robert Hendricks. And Jenkins, alert local PD and county sheriff. "We've got 3 missing persons cases that just got solved." "That's great news, Cole." "Their families are going to be—" "No," I interrupted. "It's not great news. Not yet. Because I have no idea what happened to them. I have no idea why they're doing this. And I have no idea what state their minds are in." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean, they're not responding to anything. They're not talking, not acknowledging me, not stopping on their own. They're just walking backwards, like they're being controlled by something." "Controlled by what?" That was the question, wasn't it? Controlled by what? Drugs? Some kind of toxin? A parasite? Mass hysteria? None of those explanations made sense. In the distance, I heard the sound of engines. Multiple vehicles. Backup was arriving faster than expected. I could see lights through the trees now, red and blue strobing against the dark forest. "I've got backup arriving," I told Jenkins. "I'll call you back." I clipped the radio back to my belt and focused on the 3 hikers. They were still walking, still moving with that mechanical precision. I wanted to stop them, to make them sit down until medical arrived, but something told me not to. Something told me that interrupting whatever they were doing might be dangerous. So I just followed them, kept my distance, watched them walk backwards through the beam of my flashlight. And that's when I noticed something I'd missed before. Something that made my blood run cold. "That's pretty specific, Cole. What's going on out there?" Jenkins sounded more alert now. I could hear vehicles approaching, engines growing louder. Backup would be here any minute. But I couldn't take my eyes off the ground. In the dirt of the trail, illuminated by my flashlight, were footprints. Lots and lots of footprints, all going in the same direction as these 3, all backward. The trail was soft here, muddy from recent rain, and the prints were clear. I knelt down to examine them more closely. Different shoe sizes, different tread patterns. Some looked fresh, maybe hours old. Others were older, partially washed away by weather, but still visible. I started counting. 5 different sets of prints. No, 6. Wait, 7, maybe more. It was hard to tell where one person's tracks ended and another's began, but there were definitely multiple individuals who had walked this exact path. Backwards. I stood up and shone my flashlight further down the trail, following the direction the 3 hikers were heading. The footprints continued. Dozens of them. Maybe more than dozens. The trail was churned up with backward-facing footprints, like a whole group of people had passed through here, all walking the wrong way, all heading to the same place. "Where are you going?" I whispered, more to myself than to them. "What's up there?" Ellie, Tyler, and Dr. Hendricks didn't answer. They just kept walking, step after step after step. Their eyes fixed on something behind them that I couldn't see. Vehicle doors slammed behind me. I heard voices, footsteps running on the forest road. "Cole, Where are you?" It was Officer Martinez from County, a good cop I'd worked with on search and rescue operations before. I turned and waved my flashlight. "Over here! I've got 3 subjects, possible missing persons." Martinez jogged over, followed by 2 EMTs carrying medical bags. But when they saw the 3 hikers, everyone stopped in their tracks. "What the hell?" Martinez muttered. "Yeah," I said. "That's what I thought too." The EMTs approached cautiously, trying to check vital signs while the hikers kept walking. It was awkward, surreal, trying to take someone's blood pressure while they walked backwards through the forest. "Pupils are responsive," one EMT reported. "Heart rate normal. Blood pressure a little low, but nothing critical. They're severely dehydrated, though, and malnourished. I'd say they haven't had proper food or water in weeks." "Can you stop them?" I asked. The EMT shook his head. "I don't want to forcefully restrain them without knowing what's wrong. Could be a medical condition, could be psychological. Either way, restraints might make it worse. We need to get them to the hospital. Let the doctors figure it out." "How do you transport someone who won't stop walking backwards?" Nobody had an answer to that. Martinez was looking at the footprints now, his flashlight beam moving slowly along the trail. "Cole, how many people do you think walked through here?" "I don't know," I admitted. 10, 20, hard to say. When? Some of these prints look fresh, like within the last 24 hours. Others are older. Days, maybe weeks. Martinez looked at me, and I could see the same fear in his eyes that I was feeling. "You think there are more of them out there? More people walking backwards?" I don't know what to think. One of the EMTs had gotten Ellie to sit down, finally, by literally standing in her path and not moving. She'd stopped, just like before, and when he gently guided her to sit on a fallen log, she complied. But her eyes never changed. Still empty. Still staring backwards. Tyler and Dr. Hendricks sat down next to her when we repeated the process. The 3 of them sat there in a row on that log, staring backwards into the darkness, their faces illuminated by our flashlights. "We need to follow those tracks," I said to Martinez. "See where they lead." He shook his head. "Not tonight. We need to get these 3 to the hospital first. Then we can organize a proper search team, bring in more people, do this right." He was right, of course. That was the smart play, the safe play. But something told me we were running out of time. That whatever had happened to Ellie, Tyler, and Dr. Hendricks was still happening. That somewhere up that trail, more people were walking backwards, being drawn to something we didn't understand. The EMTs called for an ambulance, and we waited in that cold forest, surrounded by backward footprints, watching 3 missing persons who couldn't tell us where they'd been or why they'd come back this way. And the whole time, they never stopped staring backwards, never stopped looking at something we couldn't see. Whatever they'd found out there in the wilderness, whatever had happened to them during those missing weeks, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later, its red and white lights strobing against the trees, creating strange shadows that danced across the forest. I watched as the EMTs carefully loaded Ellie, Tyler, and Dr. Hendricks into the back. They had to be guided every step of the way, like children learning to walk. They wouldn't get into the ambulance on their own. They just kept trying to walk backwards, even when it meant walking into the vehicle's closed doors. It took 4 of us to get them seated on the gurneys, and even then, strapped down with safety belts, they kept staring backward. Their heads were turned as far as they could go, necks craned, eyes fixed on the darkness outside the ambulance's rear windows, looking at something we couldn't see, or looking for something they'd left behind. Martinez stood next to me as the ambulance pulled away, its siren cutting through the night. "You going to follow them to the hospital?" I shook my head. "No, I need to see where those footprints lead, before it gets light out and we lose them." "Cole, it's 3 a.m. You've been on shift since midnight. You're exhausted." He was right. I was exhausted. My eyes burned from the cold and the adrenaline crash was starting to hit. But I couldn't stop now. Something was happening in these woods, something that had taken 3 people and done God knows what to them. And if there were more victims out there, more people walking backwards through the forest, I needed to find them before it was too late. "I'm calling in sick tomorrow," I said. "Or today, whatever day it is now. I need to do this." Martinez studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "All right. But you're not going alone. Give me 5 minutes to call my sergeant and get clearance. Then we're going together." While Martinez made his calls, I walked back to the trail, to the spot where I'd first stopped the 3 hikers. The footprints were still there, clear in the beam of my flashlight. I started following them north, moving slowly, counting as I went. 12 different sets of prints, maybe 13. It was hard to tell exactly, but there were definitely more than 10 people who had walked this path backwards. The prints overlapped in places, some deeper than others, suggesting different times of passage. Some of the tracks veered slightly off the main trail, then corrected back to center, as if the walkers had briefly lost their way before finding it again. I noticed something else, too. Every 50 feet or so, there was a disturbance in the dirt. A spot where someone had stopped, stood still for a moment, then continued. The 3 hikers I'd found had done the same thing, I remembered. They'd frozen whenever I touched them, then resumed walking when I let go, like they were on an autopilot that could be paused but not fully stopped. "Ready?" Martinez appeared behind me, making me jump. He'd changed into hiking boots and grabbed a heavy flashlight from his patrol car. He also had his service weapon on his belt and a radio clipped to his vest. "Yeah, let's go." We started up the trail following the backward footprints. The night was getting colder, the temperature probably down to the low 30s now. Our breath fogged in thick clouds, and frost was forming on the exposed rocks and tree roots. The forest was silent except for our footsteps and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. We walked for maybe 45 minutes, covering about 2 miles. The trail here was steep, climbing up toward Water Rock Knob, one of the higher elevations in the Nantahala. My legs burned from the incline, and I could hear Martinez breathing hard behind me. "How far does this go?" he asked. "Trail goes all the way to Georgia if you follow it south, Maine if you go north. But I don't think they were walking that far. Look," I pointed my flashlight at the ground. The footprints were getting more concentrated here, more chaotic, like multiple people had converged on this spot, all coming from different directions, but ending up in the same place. And then the trail split. To the left, the main Appalachian Trail continued north, white blazes painted on the trees marking the official route. But to the right, there was a smaller, unmarked path, an old Forest Service trail that had been closed to the public maybe 20 years ago after a rock slide made it too dangerous to maintain. We'd put up signs at the entrance, warning hikers to stay off, but the signs had long since fallen down or been removed by vandals. The backward footprints led to the right, down the closed trail. "Jesus," Martinez muttered. "When was the last time anyone went down there?" "Years," I said, "maybe a decade. That trail leads to the old Black Rock mine. It's been abandoned since the 1960s. The entrance was sealed with concrete and rebar after some kids got hurt exploring it back in the 80s. You think that's where they were going? The mine? Only one way to find out." We turned onto the closed trail, and immediately the forest changed. The main AT was well maintained, cleared of fallen trees and overgrown brush. But this old trail was wild, reclaimed by nature. Branches hung low, forcing us to duck and weave. Thorny vines grabbed at our clothes. The path was barely visible, marked only by the footprints in the dirt. After another 30 minutes of difficult hiking, we saw it. A chain-link fence, maybe 8 feet tall, with "Danger, no trespassing" signs wired to it every few yards. Beyond the fence, built into the side of the mountain, was the entrance to Black Rock Mine, except the entrance wasn't sealed anymore. The concrete barrier that had been installed in the 1980s was gone. Not broken or chipped away, but completely removed, as if someone had carefully cut it out. The rebar was cut clean through, the edges smooth and professional. This wasn't the work of curious teenagers with crowbars. This was deliberate, planned, and the fence had been cut too. A large section of chain link had been removed, creating an opening wide enough for a person to walk through. The backward footprints led straight to the opening, straight into the mine. Martinez and I exchanged glances. Neither of us said anything for a moment. We both knew this had just escalated from a weird missing persons case to something much more serious. "We should call for backup," Martinez said quietly. "And tell them what?" "We found an abandoned mine that's been unsealed. It'll take hours to get a team together, get the approvals, organize equipment. By then, it'll be daylight. So I think whatever's happening in there happens at night. Those 3 hikers I found, they were walking at 2 a.m. All these footprints are fresh, made at night. I don't think we can wait." Martinez looked at the mine entrance, then back at me. "You're talking about going in there. Yeah, that's insane. We have no idea what's in there. Could be structurally unsound, could be toxic gas, could be anything." He was right, it was insane. Going into an abandoned mine in the middle of the night with no proper equipment or backup was about as stupid as you could get. It violated every safety protocol we had. If my supervisor found out, I'd probably be suspended. But those backward footprints didn't lie. Ellie Mitchell, Tyler Crowley, and Dr. Robert Hendricks had gone into this mine, and based on the number of prints, they weren't alone. There could be a dozen more people in there wandering in the dark, unable to help themselves. "I'm going in," I said. "You don't have to come." Martinez sighed, the kind of deep, resigned sigh that said he'd already made his decision. "You're not going alone, you idiot. But we're calling this in first. Let someone know where we are, what we're doing. If we don't check in by dawn, they'll know where to send the search party." He radioed back to dispatch, giving them our location and our plan. The dispatcher tried to talk us out of it, but Martinez cut her off. "We're going in. We'll check in every 30 minutes. If you don't hear from us by 6 a.m., send everyone." We clicked on our flashlights and approached the mine entrance. Up close, it was even more imposing. The opening was maybe 7 feet tall and 6 feet wide, carved directly into the granite mountainside. The air coming out of it was cold, colder than the forest around us, and it smelled wrong. Not like rot or decay, but like stone and rust and something else I couldn't quite identify. Something chemical. The backward footprints were clear on the mine floor, preserved in the layer of dust and dirt that had accumulated over decades. We followed them inside. The mine shaft stretched ahead of us, perfectly straight for maybe 50 feet before angling downward and to the left. The walls were rough-hewn rock, with old wooden support beams every 10 feet or so. Some of the beams were rotting, sagging under the weight of the mountain above us. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a steady rhythmic sound that echoed off the stone. Our flashlights revealed old mining equipment scattered along the walls. Rusted pickaxes, broken lanterns, the twisted remains of what looked like a mining cart. Everything covered in that same layer of dust and rust. Everything except the floor. The floor had been disturbed recently. Very recently. The footprints were clear, and there were other marks too. Drag marks, like something heavy had been pulled deeper into the mine. "Coal," Martinez whispered, his voice tight. "Look at this." He was pointing his flashlight at the wall to our right. Someone had carved something into the stone. No, not carved, scratched. Deep, frantic scratches that spelled out words in a messy, desperate scrawl. "Turn back. Don't look, it will see you." The letters were fresh, the stone still bright white where it had been gouged. This wasn't decades old. This was recent, maybe days, maybe hours. "We should turn back," Martinez said, and I could hear the fear in his voice now. But before I could answer, we heard something. A sound from deeper in the mine. Rhythmic. Regular, the sound of footsteps. Someone was coming toward us. No, not someone. Multiple someones. The footsteps were overlapping, synchronized, getting louder, and they were walking backwards. I could tell by the pattern of the sound, the way the heels hit first instead of the toes. Martinez and I both drew our weapons, aiming them down the mine shaft, our flashlights mounted on top illuminating the darkness. And then they emerged from around the corner. 3 more hikers. A man and 2 women, walking backwards just like the others. Their eyes empty, their clothes torn and filthy, their faces gaunt. They were walking directly toward us, their backs to the direction they were moving, and they showed no sign of stopping. "Police!" Martinez shouted. "Stop where you are!" They didn't stop, they just kept coming, step after mechanical step. I holstered my weapon and stepped forward, blocking their path. "Ma'am, sir, you need to stop. We're here to help you." The lead hiker, a woman in her 40s with short blonde hair, stopped the moment I spoke. The other 2 stopped with her, in perfect synchronization. They stood there in the mine shaft, staring backwards into the darkness they'd come from. And then the woman spoke. It was the first sound any of them had made. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but in the echoing silence of the mine, it was perfectly clear. "It's waiting." Martinez and I froze. The woman's lips had moved, forming the words, but her eyes remained empty, like a puppet speaking with someone else's voice. "What's waiting?" I asked, my heart pounding. "What's down there?" The woman's head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something. Then she spoke again, in that same flat, emotionless whisper. "Everyone who walked forward had to walk back." "What does that mean?" "I don't understand." But she didn't answer. She just started walking again, backwards toward us. We had to step aside to let them pass. As they moved by us, heading towards the mine entrance, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. The woman's fingernails were broken and bloody, the tips worn down to the quick, like she'd been clawing at stone. And on her arms, barely visible beneath the torn sleeves of her jacket, were scratches. Deep, self-inflicted scratches that had scabbed over, like she'd been trying to wake herself up, like she'd been trying to fight whatever was controlling her. The 3 hikers walked past us and disappeared into the night, heading back toward the main trail. We let them go. Martinez was already on his radio calling for backup to intercept them to get them to the hospital, but I was looking deeper into the mine, into the darkness where they'd come from. "Everyone who walked forward had to walk back," I repeated. "Martinez, I think there are more people down there. I think this is where they all went. And I think something down there is sending them back out. Then we need to get out of here and wait for a full team. Hazmat suits, proper equipment, the whole deal." He was right. That was the smart move, the safe move. But the smart move takes time, hours, maybe days. And how many people were down there right now, walking backwards through the dark, waiting to be sent back out? I made a decision I'd probably regret for the rest of my life. "You head back," I told Martinez. Coordinate with backup, get those 3 to the hospital. I'm going deeper, just to do a quick survey, see what we're dealing with. Cole, I know what it is, but I have to. You understand? Martinez looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 30 minutes. If I don't hear from you in 30 minutes, I'm coming back with everyone I can get. And if you die down there, I'm going to tell your wife you went out doing something stupid. I wasn't married, but I appreciated the sentiment. 30 minutes, I'll check in. Martinez headed back toward the entrance, his flashlight bobbing in the darkness. I waited until he was gone, until I was alone in the mine shaft before I turned and started walking deeper. The footprints led downward, the tunnel sloping at maybe a 15-degree angle. The support beams were closer together here, and some of them were cracked, pieces of ceiling rock scattered on the floor. The air grew colder with each step, and that chemical smell grew stronger. After maybe 200 yards, the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber. It was maybe 30 feet across, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above my flashlight beam. This must have been one of the main mining chambers, where they'd extracted whatever mineral or ore this mountain had once held. But it was what was in the chamber that made me stop dead in my tracks. Sleeping bags. Dozens of them arranged in neat rows along the walls. Some were occupied, people curled up inside them, perfectly still. Backpacks and hiking gear were piled in organized stacks. Camping stoves, water bottles, food supplies. It looked like a base camp. Like people had been living here, but why? Why would anyone choose to live in an abandoned mine? I approached one of the sleeping bags slowly. Inside was a young man, maybe 25, with dark hair and a scraggly beard. His eyes were closed, and for a moment I thought he might be dead. But then I saw his chest rise and fall. He was breathing, sleeping. I knelt down beside him. "Sir, can you hear me? Are you okay?" His eyes snapped open. They were completely white. No pupils, no irises, just white, like cataracts, but worse, like his eyes had been filled with milk. I jerked backward and he sat up in one smooth motion. Around the chamber, the others were sitting up too, all at the same time. Maybe 15 people, all with those same white eyes, all turning to look at me. No, not look. They couldn't see, but they knew I was there. One of them spoke, a young woman's voice, flat and emotionless. "You walked forward." Another voice, an older man. "You walked forward." A third voice, overlapping the others. "You walked forward." They were all saying it now, a chorus of monotone voices echoing in the chamber. "You walked forward. You walked forward. You walked forward." And then they stood up, all of them in perfect unison. They turned toward the deeper darkness at the back of the chamber, toward a tunnel I hadn't noticed before, and they started walking backwards. I stood there, frozen, as they filed past me. 15 people, all walking backwards, all heading deeper into the mine. Their white eyes stared at nothing, their movements mechanical, perfect. And as the last one passed me, a teenager who couldn't have been more than 17, he stopped. His head turned slightly toward me, and he spoke in a voice that didn't sound like his own. "It wants to show you. It wants you to understand." Then he continued walking, disappearing into the deeper tunnel with the others. I was alone in the chamber now, my flashlight the only source of light. The sleeping bags lay empty. The supplies sat undisturbed. And that tunnel at the back of the chamber beckoned, a black throat leading deeper into the mountain. I checked my watch. 25 minutes had passed since Martinez left. 5 minutes until I needed to check in. 5 minutes to decide whether to go deeper or turn back. I thought about Ellie Mitchell, walking backwards through the forest. I thought about Dr. Hendricks, staring at nothing with those empty eyes. I thought about all the missing persons reports, all the families waiting for answers, all the people who had vanished into these mountains and never returned. I thought about that message scratched into the wall, "Don't look, it will see you." And I made my choice. I started walking forward into the deeper tunnel, toward whatever was waiting in the darkness, toward whatever had taken all these people and sent them back out walking backwards. Because someone had to know. Someone had to see, even if it meant I might never walk forward again. The deeper tunnel was narrower than the main shaft, barely wide enough for one person to walk through comfortably. The walls pressed in on both sides, rough stone that scraped against my jacket as I moved forward. My flashlight beam only penetrated maybe 20 feet ahead before being swallowed by the darkness. The air here was different. Colder, yes, but also thicker somehow, like breathing through wet cloth, and that chemical smell was overwhelming now, burning my nostrils and making my eyes water. It reminded me of ozone, like the smell after a lightning strike, but mixed with something organic, something wrong. The tunnel sloped downward at a steeper angle now, maybe 30 degrees. I had to brace myself against the walls to keep from sliding. The floor was smooth here, worn down by something. Water, maybe. Or by the passage of many feet over a long period of time. But these weren't old tracks. The backward footprints I was following were fresh, made by the 15 people who had just walked past me. I could see where they'd shuffled and adjusted, their shoes leaving clear tread patterns in the dust. I checked my watch. 28 minutes since Martinez left. I should radio in, let them know I was okay. But something told me to wait. Something told me I was close to understanding, and if I radioed now, they'd order me back out. They'd send in a full team with hazmat suits and protocols, and by then, whatever was down here might be gone. Or worse, it might take more people. The tunnel opened up again after another 100 yards. I emerged into another chamber, this one much larger than the first. My flashlight couldn't reach the far wall or the ceiling. It just disappeared into vast darkness, like I'd stepped into an underground cathedral. But it was what was in the center of the chamber that made me stop. A hole, a perfectly circular hole in the floor, maybe 15 feet across, and around it, carved into the stone floor, were symbols, not mining marks or graffiti, but something else, something deliberate and complex, geometric patterns that hurt to look at, that seemed to shift and move even though they were just carved stone. They reminded me of circuit boards, or maybe neural pathways, all flowing toward that central hole. And from the hole came light. Faint, pulsing, purple-blue light. Like a UV lamp, but brighter. It flickered in a rhythm that was almost hypnotic, almost like breathing. In and out, in and out. The 15 people I'd been following were arranged in a circle around the hole, standing perfectly still, their backs to it, staring outward with those white eyes. They weren't moving now, just standing, waiting. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and run. My hand went to my radio and I actually keyed it this time. "Martinez, you there?" Static, then, "Cole." "Jesus, you were supposed to check in 5 minutes ago. What's your status?" "I'm deeper in the mine. I found something. I need you to—" The 15 people turned toward me in perfect unison. Their white eyes reflected my flashlight beam, glowing like animal eyes in the dark. And they spoke, all of them at once in that same flat monotone, "He sees you now." My radio exploded with static, a harsh screaming sound that made me drop it. The feedback was so loud it echoed through the chamber, and when it finally stopped, the radio was dead. Just a useless piece of plastic and circuits. I was alone now. Truly alone. No backup. No way to call for help. Deep in a mountain with 15 people who weren't quite people anymore, and a hole in the ground that pulsed with impossible light. "Who sees me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What is down there?" One of them stepped forward. A young man, maybe 20, with dark hair and that same blank, white-eyed stare. He tilted his head, and when he spoke, his voice was wrong. Too deep, too layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. We walked forward into the mountain. We walked with purpose and direction. We walked seeking summits and vistas and the satisfaction of distance covered. And so we walked back through time, back through space, back through the fold. "I don't understand." Another voice, a woman this time, but with that same layered quality. "The mountain is thin here. The walls between are paper. We pushed through, walking forward, and we found what waits on the other side. What has always waited. What will always wait." The pulsing light from the hole grew brighter, and I felt something pulling at me. Not physically, but mentally, like a current in a river trying to sweep me toward that opening. I took a step backward, then another, fighting against it. "What is it?" I demanded. "What's down there?" All 15 of them spoke now, their voices merging into a horrible chorus. The walker. The one who goes backward through forward time. The entity that moves against the current. It exists in the space between steps, in the moment before movement, in the pause before progress. And it calls to those who walk. It shows them the truth, that all forward movement is illusion, that all progress is circular, that the only way to truly move is to walk back to the beginning and start again. The light pulsed faster now, and I could hear something. A sound coming from the hole, not a voice exactly, but something that felt like thought made audible. A humming, thrumming sound that resonated in my chest and made my teeth ache. And I understood, this wasn't a hole, it was a tear, a rip in reality. And something on the other side was looking through, reaching through, pulling people toward it. Ellie Mitchell hadn't gotten lost on the trail. Tyler Crowley hadn't wandered off from his friends. Dr. Hendricks hadn't had a medical emergency. They'd been called, drawn here by something that existed outside normal space and time, something that had learned to manipulate hikers by tapping into their most basic instinct. The drive to move forward, to make progress, to reach the destination. And once they arrived, once they looked into that hole and saw what was on the other side, they couldn't move forward anymore. They could only move backward, walking away from what they'd seen, trying to unsee it, trying to undo the journey that had brought them here. But they couldn't stop walking, because the entity, the walker, was still connected to them, still pulling them back and forth like puppets on strings, showing them to others, spreading its influence, drawing more people into the mountains. "How many?" I asked. "How many people have you taken?" The young man tilted his head again. 43 forward walkers have become backward walkers in the past 2 years. Some we send out to guide others here. Some we keep to maintain the circle. Some... He paused, and something like sadness crossed his face. Some we lost. Their minds broke before the transformation completed. They walked off cliffs. They walked into rivers. They walked until they couldn't walk anymore. 43 people. 43 missing persons cases that had probably been written off as tragic accidents or people who didn't want to be found. I looked at the hole again, at the pulsing purple light. Part of me wanted to approach it, to look inside, to understand what they'd seen. But I knew that was the influence talking. That was the entity reaching into my mind, planting that curiosity, that need to know. "You can resist," I said, looking at the young man. "You're still in there somewhere. You're still you. You can fight this." For a moment, something flickered in those white eyes. Something human. His hand twitched, rising slightly as if reaching toward me. His mouth opened, and a different voice came out, younger, more frightened. "Help! Me!" Then his eyes went blank again, and he stepped back into formation with the others. Whatever brief moment of autonomy he'd had was gone. I had to get out, had to warn people, had to make sure this mine was sealed permanently, buried under concrete and steel, make sure no one could ever come down here again. I turned to leave, and they moved to block my path. All 15 of them, forming a wall between me and the exit tunnel. "You walked forward," they said in unison. "You came seeking answers. You came seeking truth. You came seeking understanding, and now you must walk back with what you've learned. You must carry the knowledge backward into the world. You must show others the way." No. I drew my weapon, hands shaking. Move. Now. They didn't move. They just stared at me with those white eyes, and behind them, the hole pulsed brighter. "You cannot harm us," they said. "We are already harmed. We are already broken. We are already changed. Bullets cannot undo what has been done. Violence cannot close what has been opened. You walked forward. Now you must walk back." The pull was stronger now. I could feel it like gravity, like standing on the edge of a cliff and feeling the irrational urge to jump. My feet wanted to move toward that hole. My eyes wanted to look into that impossible light. I fired my weapon into the air, the shot deafening in the enclosed space. I said, "Move." They didn't even flinch. The gunshot echoed away into nothing, and they remained perfectly still. I had seconds to make a choice. I could try to force my way through them, physically push past 15 people who probably wouldn't resist, but wouldn't help either. Or I could turn and run, find another way out, even if it meant going deeper into the mine first. Or I could look into the hole. Understand what they understood. See what they'd seen. That last thought terrified me because I realized it wasn't entirely my own thought. It was being planted there, suggested, whispered into my mind by something that existed in that space between spaces. I made my decision. I ran. Not toward the exit because they were blocking it, but to the left, along the wall of the chamber, where I could see another tunnel opening. Smaller, rougher, probably an exploratory shaft that the miners had abandoned. But it was away from the hole, away from the influence, and that was all that mattered. I heard them moving behind me, their footsteps synchronized, following me. But they were walking backwards, which meant they were slower, less agile. I had a chance. The tunnel I'd chosen was barely more than a crack in the rock, forcing me to turn sideways and squeeze through. My flashlight scraped against the stone, flickering, and for a horrible moment I thought it would go out and I'd be trapped in total darkness. But it held. The beam steadied, and I pushed through into another passage. This one sloped upward, and I could feel air moving. Fresh air. There was another way out. I ran, stumbling over loose rocks and old mining equipment. Behind me, I could hear them following. That same steady backward march. And I could still hear it. That thrumming sound from the hole, getting fainter but never quite disappearing. The passage twisted and turned, getting narrower in some places, wider in others. I lost track of time, lost track of distance. All I knew was up, forward, out, and then I saw it. Natural light. Faint and gray, but unmistakably dawn light filtering through a crack in the rock face. I climbed toward it, my hand scraping on stone, my lungs burning. The crack was small, maybe 2 feet across, but beyond it I could see trees. A sky. Freedom. I squeezed through, feeling rock tear at my jacket and skin, not caring. And then I was out, tumbling down a small slope, rolling through dead leaves and dirt until I came to rest at the base of a tree. I lay there for a moment, gasping, looking up at the gray pre-dawn sky. I'd made it. I was out. But when I stood up and looked around, trying to get my bearings, I realized something was wrong. I was facing the wrong direction. The mine entrance should have been to the north, back toward the main trail. But I was looking south, and when I turned around to correct myself, to face north, my body resisted. It wanted to face south, wanted to walk backward. Number. No, 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 no. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, but they looked normal. I checked my reflection in my phone screen. My eyes were still brown, not white. Not yet, but I could feel it, that pull, that urge to turn around and walk backwards, to face the mine I'd just escaped from, to find my way back to that hole and complete the transformation. I fought it, forced myself to turn north, to face away from the mine. Every step was a battle, every movement forward felt like walking through water. But I moved. I walked forward, toward where I thought the trail was, toward where Martinez should be waiting with backup. I don't know how long I walked. Minutes? Hours? The sun was rising now, casting long shadows through the trees. My phone was dead. My radio was still back in the mine, and I had no way to know where I was. But I kept moving forward, one step at a time, fighting against every instinct that told me to turn around. And then I heard voices. Martinez's voice calling my name. Cole! David, can you hear me? I tried to answer, but my throat was raw from breathing that chemical air. I managed a hoarse shout, and moments later Martinez crashed through the underbrush, followed by what looked like half the county police force and a full search and rescue team. Jesus Christ, Cole! Martinez grabbed my shoulders. We've been looking for you for 3 hours. When your radio cut out, what happened down there? I tried to explain, tried to tell him about the hole, the purple light, the walker, the 15 people with white eyes. But the words came out jumbled, confused. I sounded insane even to myself. Martinez was looking at me with concern and something else. Fear. Cole, your nose is bleeding, and your eyes. I wiped my nose, and my hand came away red. My eyes are fine. They're not white. I checked. No, not white. But they're bloodshot. Really bloodshot. And you're not blinking, like at all. I forced myself to blink, and it hurt. When had I stopped blinking? We need to get you to a hospital, Martinez said. Get you checked out. You've been exposed to something down there. No hospital, I said. Not yet. We need to seal that mine, now, today. Permanent seal. Concrete, steel, whatever it takes. And we need to post guards, 24/7, because people are going to want to come here. People are going to feel drawn to this place, and we can't let anyone else go inside. Martinez exchanged glances with the other officers. I could see what they were thinking, that I'd lost it, that the stress and the exhaustion and whatever I'd been exposed to in the mine had pushed me over the edge. But then one of the search and rescue guys stepped forward. Sheriff, we found something you need to see. We followed him through the trees to a small clearing, and there, arranged in a perfect circle, were camping tents. Maybe 20 of them, all empty, all with their doors open, facing toward the mountain, toward the mine. And in the center of the circle was a sign, hand-painted on a piece of plywood. Appalachian Trail. Spiritual retreat. Find yourself by losing your way next session. October 21. October 21st was 3 days away. Martinez looked at me, and I saw the fear in his eyes now. The understanding. How many people? I looked at the tents, doing the math. If they're all full, maybe 40 people, maybe more. We need to find who organized this. Shut it down, arrest them. You won't find them, I said quietly. They're already here. They've already walked backward. They're the ones who set this up, who spread the word, who guided people here. They're doing exactly what it wants them to do, bringing more forward walkers to become backward walkers. One of the officers was on his radio, calling for more backup. Another was taking photos of the camp. Martinez just stood there, looking at that sign, and I could see him processing it all, trying to fit it into a framework that made sense. "What did you see down there, Cole?" he asked quietly. "What's in that mine?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could speak we heard something. A sound from the trees. Footsteps. Multiple sets of footsteps, all synchronized, all moving in the same direction. And then they emerged from the forest. Ellie Mitchell, Tyler Crowley, Dr. Robert Hendricks, the 3 hikers from last night. They'd been taken to the hospital, sedated, put under observation, but they'd escaped, or been released, or walked out while everyone's attention was on finding me. And they weren't alone. Behind them were the 3 I'd found in the mine. And behind them more. People in hospital gowns, people in hiking gear, people in regular clothes, all walking backwards, all with those empty eyes. There were maybe 30 of them now, all converging on this clearing, all heading toward the mountain. "Stop them!" Martinez shouted, and the officers moved to intercept. But the backwards walkers didn't stop. They just walked around the officers, or through them, or waited until someone moved out of the way. You couldn't physically stop them, I'd learned. You could pause them, hold them in place, but the moment you let go, they continued on their path. And their path led to the mine. I watched them go, a silent procession of the broken and changed, all returning to the source of their transformation. Some of them would emerge again in a few hours or days, ready to walk back out into the world and guide others here. Some would stay, becoming permanent parts of the circle, maintaining the connection between this world and whatever existed on the other side of that hole. "We need to evacuate the area," I said. "Close the trails. The whole section. Tell people there's been a gas leak or a wildfire or something. Get everyone out." "For how long?" Martinez asked. I thought about that question. Thought about the entity in the mine, the walker, existing outside of time, pulling people toward it through that tear in reality. How do you stop something that exists in the space between moments? How do you fight something that moves against the current of time itself? "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe forever." They made me take 3 days off. Mandatory psychiatric evaluation, they called it. After you've been lost in an abandoned mine, exposed to unknown chemical agents, and emerged babbling about entities that exist outside of time, the department requires a full psychological workup before you can return to duty. Dr. Ellie Crowley was kind about it. She didn't call me crazy, at least not to my face. She listened to my story, took notes, asked gentle questions. And at the end of our second session, she closed her notebook and looked at me with something like pity. "David, I'm going to be honest with you. What you experienced in that mine was likely a severe dissociative episode triggered by oxygen deprivation and possible exposure to toxic gases. Old mines often contain pockets of methane, carbon monoxide, even radon. These gases can cause hallucinations, paranoia, false memories. I know what I saw. I'm sure you do. That's the nature of hallucinations. They feel completely real. Your brain was trying to make sense of a traumatic situation and it created a narrative. What about the other people? The backwards walkers? I didn't hallucinate them. There are witnesses. Martinez saw them. The whole search and rescue team saw them. There were certainly missing persons who were found. And yes, they were exhibiting unusual behavior, likely also caused by the same toxic exposure. But David, there was no hole in the chamber. The sealing team went down there 2 days ago. They documented everything. There are photographs, video. The chamber you described? It's just an empty mining shaft, no symbols on the floor, no supernatural light source. Just rock and dust and old equipment. I stared at her. That's impossible. I saw it. I was there. The human mind is incredibly powerful. When exposed to certain chemicals, especially in a high-stress situation, it can construct elaborate false scenarios that incorporate real elements, like the backward-walking hikers, into a larger, delusional framework. She slid a folder across her desk. Inside were photographs from the sealing operation, the main mine shaft, the first chamber where I'd found the sleeping bags. Except in these photos, there were no sleeping bags, just empty stone, the deeper tunnel, the large chamber with the hole. Except there was no hole. Just solid rock floor, unmarked and undisturbed. We tested the air down there, Dr. Crowley continued. Elevated levels of radon and carbon monoxide, just as I suspected. Anyone spending extended time in that environment would experience symptoms similar to what you described. Disorientation, hallucinations, time distortion. Then explain the backwards walkers. Explain why Ellie Mitchell and Tyler Crowley and all the others are still walking backwards. Explain why they won't stop. Dr. Crowley's expression softened. That's a separate issue. They're receiving treatment. The prevailing theory is that it's a form of dissociative fugue state, possibly triggered by trauma or drug exposure. Some hikers experiment with substances, mushrooms, LSD. If multiple people consume the same contaminated batch, it could explain the shared symptoms. I wanted to argue, wanted to show her that I wasn't crazy, that what I'd seen was real. But looking at those photographs, seeing that empty chamber with no trace of the horror I'd witnessed, I felt doubt creeping in. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe my brain had taken the real mystery of the backwards walkers and constructed an elaborate explanation to make sense of it. Except I could still feel it. That pull, that urge to turn around and face south, to walk backward to where I'd been. I just hadn't told Dr. Crowley about that part yet. The mine has been permanently sealed, she said. The entrance has been filled with concrete. The Forest Service is installing additional barriers and warning signs. Whatever happened down there, it's over now. You're safe. Those hikers are safe. And with time and treatment, everyone will recover. She prescribed me medication, anti-anxiety drugs, sleeping pills, told me to take a week off, spend time with family, practice self-care, all the usual post-trauma protocol. I nodded and agreed and took the prescriptions, and then I went home and threw them in the trash. Because whatever was in that mine, it wasn't over. And I wasn't crazy. The proof came 3 days later. I was in my apartment trying to sleep when my phone rang. It was 3:17 a.m. Martinez's name on the caller ID. "Cole, you need to get down here now. I'm on mandatory leave. I don't care. This is unofficial. Just come, alone." He gave me an address in town, a residential street I knew well. I got dressed and drove over, fighting the urge to look in my rearview mirror more than necessary, fighting the urge to drive backwards. Martinez was waiting in his personal car, not a patrol vehicle. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Get in." I slid into the passenger seat and he started driving, not toward the station but out of town, toward the forest. "They sealed the mine," Martinez said without preamble. 3-foot-thick concrete plug. Steel reinforcement, the whole 9 yards, cost the county about $80,000. Dr. Crowley showed me the photos. Yeah, the official photos. He pulled a phone from his pocket and tossed it to me. "These are the unofficial ones." I opened the photo gallery. The images were dark, taken with flashlights but clear enough. They showed the sealing operation. Workers in hazmat suits drilling into rock, setting rebar, pouring concrete. And in the background of one photo, barely visible in the darkness beyond the work lights, were people, standing in a circle, watching. I zoomed in, their eyes reflected the camera flash, white and glowing. The sealing crew didn't see them, Martinez said. Or if they did, they didn't report it. These photos were on the foreman's phone. He quit the next day, moved to Florida, won't return my calls. So they're still down there, the backwards walkers. Sealed in behind 3 feet of concrete, trapped. Martinez's hands were tight on the steering wheel. Except they're not trapped. That's what I need to show you. We drove for another 20 minutes, deep into the forest on unmarked roads. Finally, Martinez pulled over at a small turnout and killed the engine. "You're going to think I'm crazy," he said. "Hell, I think I'm crazy. But I need someone else to see this, someone who was down there with me." We hiked through the woods, flashlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. After about a mile, Martinez stopped and pointed. There was a cabin, small, rustic, the kind of place hunters use during deer season. Smoke was rising from the chimney. "Who lives here?" I asked. "Nobody. Place has been abandoned for years." Martinez moved closer and I followed. Through the cabin's window I could see movement inside. People. They were sitting at a table, but they were facing away from it, their backs to the meal that had been laid out. Not eating, just sitting, staring at the wall behind them. "How many?" I whispered. "I've counted at least 15. They arrived 2 nights ago, after the mine was sealed. They broke into this cabin, and they've been here ever since. Just sitting, staring. The locals have been leaving food, but they don't eat, they don't sleep. They just sit. Someone needs to help them, get them to a hospital." We tried. Yesterday, a social worker came out with 2 deputies. The backwards walkers just stood up and walked past them. Walked right out of the cabin and into the woods. The deputies tried to follow, but lost them in the trees. 6 hours later, they were back in the cabin, sitting in the same spots. I looked at Martinez. "What do you think it means?" "I think it means sealing the mine didn't solve anything. Whatever's down there, it's still connected to these people, still controlling them, and I think it's looking for a new way out." As if on cue, the people in the cabin stood up. All at once, perfectly synchronized. They walked to the door, opened it, and filed out into the darkness. They didn't seem to notice us standing there in the trees. They formed a line, single file, and started walking. Backward, heading north, away from the sealed mine. "Where are they going?" I asked. Martinez shook his head. "That's what I want to find out." "Come on." We followed them, keeping our distance. They walked with that same mechanical precision I'd seen before, never deviating from their path, never acknowledging our presence. They walked for over an hour, climbing higher into the mountains. The sun was rising now, casting pale light through the trees, and then they stopped. We were at another mine entrance, smaller than Black Rock, older, almost hidden by vegetation, and the backwards walkers were standing in front of it, staring at it with those white eyes. "Oh no," Martinez breathed. "The Crawford mine. This was sealed back in the 70s. Same reason as Black Rock, structural instability." As we watched, one of the backwards walkers, a woman I didn't recognize, approached the entrance. She placed her hands on the old boards that had been nailed across the opening, and she pushed. The wood was rotten, weak. It splintered and fell away easily. Behind it was darkness. Another tunnel, another way into the mountain. "It's spreading," I said. "It's not just one mine, it's the whole mountain. All these old mining tunnels are connected somehow, and it's using them, using these people to open new access points." Martinez's hand went to his radio, but I grabbed his wrist. "Don't. Not yet. We have to report this." "And say what?" "That an interdimensional entity is using mind-controlled hikers to open abandoned mines. They'll lock us both up. Then what do we do?" I watched the backwards walkers file into the Crawford mine, disappearing into the darkness one by one. And I felt that pull again, that urge to follow them, to turn around and walk backward into that tunnel. It was getting stronger, harder to resist. "I need to go in there," I said. "The hell you do?" "Martinez, listen to me. I was exposed to whatever's in that mine. I can feel it working on me. Every day it gets a little stronger, a little harder to fight. Eventually, I'm going to become one of them. But right now, right at this moment, I'm still me. Still in control. Which means I can go in there and maybe understand it better. Maybe find a way to stop it. You go in there, you might not come back out. I know." I pulled out my phone and wallet and handed them to Martinez. "Give me 2 hours. If I'm not back by then, seal this entrance too. Seal them all, every old mine in these mountains. Do whatever it takes." Martinez stared at me. "You're serious?" I've never been more serious about anything in my life. He didn't want to let me go. I could see the conflict in his face, the fear and the duty warring with each other. But finally, he nodded. 2 hours, that's all you get." I clicked on my flashlight and approached the mine entrance. The boards lay scattered on the ground, and beyond them was darkness. The same cold, thick air I'd breathed before. The same chemical smell. And that sound. That thrumming, humming sound that resonated in my chest. It was calling me. It had always been calling me, from the moment I'd first encountered Ellie Mitchell on the trail. I just hadn't understood it then. I took a breath and stepped inside. The tunnel was even narrower than the one in Black Rock, forcing me to hunch over as I walked. The walls were closer, more oppressive, and I could see scratch marks in the stone. Dozens of them. Hundreds. People had clawed at these walls, trying to get out or trying to get in. I couldn't tell which. The backward footprints led deeper, and I followed them, one step at a time, fighting the urge to turn around, fighting the urge to walk backward myself. I don't know how long I walked. Time felt wrong in there, elastic and strange. Minutes could have been hours. Hours could have been seconds. The tunnel opened into a chamber, smaller than the one in Black Rock, but similar in layout. And in the center was another hole, another tear in reality, pulsing with that same purple-blue light. The 15 backwards walkers were arranged around it in a circle, just like before. But this time they weren't alone. There were others, dozens of others, people I recognized from missing persons reports, cases that had gone cold years ago. An elderly man who'd vanished while hiking in 2019. A teenage girl who'd disappeared during a camping trip in 2020. A couple who'd gone missing on their honeymoon in 2021. They were all here, all arranged in circles around the central hole. Some had white eyes. Some still had normal eyes, but that same blank expression. And some were further gone, their skin pale and waxy, their bodies thin to the point of skeletal. How long had they been here? How long had they been sustained by whatever force emanated from that hole, kept alive but not living, walking in circles for years? And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. At the edge of the chamber, partially hidden in shadow, was a mining cart, And in that cart were bones. Human bones. Dozens of skeletons piled on top of each other like cordwood. These were the ones who'd broken, the ones whose minds had shattered before the transformation could complete. The ones who'd walked off cliffs or into rivers or just collapsed and never gotten back up. The walker didn't just collect people. It consumed them, used them until they were empty shells, then discarded them and called for more. One of the backwards walkers turned to face me. Not all the way around. That would mean walking forward, but enough that I could see her face. Ellie Mitchell. She looked worse than the last time I'd seen her. Her cheeks were more hollow, her eyes more sunken. But those white eyes focused on me with an intensity that suggested there was still something of her left inside. "You came back," she said, her voice flat but with an undercurrent of something else. Desperation? Hope? "I'm not here to join you," I said. "I'm here to end this." "You can't." "It's beyond ending. It's beyond beginning. It exists in the space between, and that space is infinite. There has to be a way. There's always a way." Ellie tilted her head, and for a moment her expression changed. Her white eyes flickered, showing a hint of hazel underneath, and when she spoke again, her voice was her own. "The fold. You have to close the fold. The space between steps. You have to make it solid again. Make it real. How? I don't know how to do that." But even as I said it, I understood. The hole wasn't just a tear in reality. It was a fold, a place where space-time bent back on itself, creating a loop. Forward and backward meeting at a single point, and if you could unfold it, straighten it out, you could close the gap. But it would require going into the hole, walking into that space between spaces, and I had no idea what that would do to me. I looked at the circle of backwards walkers, at the bones in the mining cart, at Ellie Mitchell fighting to maintain control for just a few more seconds. I thought about the 40 people who were supposed to arrive at that spiritual retreat in 2 days. The hikers who would come next season, and the season after that, drawn here by something they couldn't explain. The exponential growth of victims, as the walker spread its influence further and further. I thought about Martinez waiting outside with his watch ticking down, about Dr. Crowley and her rational explanations that didn't explain anything, about my own fate if I did nothing, slowly transforming into one of these hollow shells walking backward forever. I made my choice. "Tell Martinez," I said to Ellie. "Tell him to seal all the mines, every single one, today. Don't wait. And tell him." I paused. "Tell him I'm sorry I didn't believe him when he said I was crazy." Ellie's eyes flickered again. That brief moment of humanity. "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid, something that probably won't work. But I have to try." I walked toward the hole, and the backwards walkers parted to let me pass. They formed a corridor, a pathway leading directly to that pulsing purple light. And as I walked, I heard them speaking, all of them at once, in a voice that was both theirs and not theirs. Forward walker comes to the fold. Forward walker seeks to understand. Forward walker will become backward walker. The circle is complete. The walker receives. I reached the edge of the hole and looked down. It wasn't a hole at all. It was a space. A gap in everything. And in that gap, I could see everything. Every moment that had ever existed or would ever exist, all happening at once. I could see myself as a child, as an old man, as bones in the ground. I could see the mountain forming, eroding, reforming. I could see the walker itself, a presence that existed across all of time simultaneously, reaching backward from the future and forward from the past, always moving against the current, always pulling people toward this impossible space. And I understood why they walked backward. Because once you saw this, once you comprehended the illusion of forward movement, the only response was to try to undo it, to walk back to before you knew, to unsee what couldn't be unseen. But maybe there was another way. Instead of looking at the whole, I focused on the edges, on the fold itself. I could see it now, how space-time bent at this point, creating a loop that connected past and future without any present in between. And I could see the weak points, the places where the fold was thinnest, where reality was barely holding together. I thought about my training as a ranger, the basic physics of hiking. Force equals mass times acceleration, leverage, pressure points. You don't need to destroy the whole fold, you just need to push the edges together, to compress the gap until it seals itself. I took a deep breath and stepped into the hole. Everything went white. Inside the fold, time doesn't exist the way you understand it. I was everywhere and everywhen at once. I saw myself being born. I saw myself dying. I saw versions of myself that never existed. Lives I never lived, choices I never made. I saw the earth forming from cosmic dust, and I saw it cold and dead billions of years in the future. I saw the first humans walking out of Africa, and I saw the last humans taking their final breaths in whatever catastrophe ends our species. And I saw the walker. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't a being. It was a principle. A fundamental force of the universe like gravity or entropy. It was the force that pulled everything backward, the counterbalance to progress, the inevitable return to the beginning that all things must eventually face. In our normal world, the walker was constrained by the laws of physics, by the linear flow of time. But here, in this fold, where past and future touched, it was free. It could reach across time, touching minds, pulling people toward this impossible space where all moments existed simultaneously. And it was doing it not out of malice, but out of nature. Like water flowing downhill or heat radiating from fire, the walker pulled things backward because that was what it was, what it had always been, what it would always be. You can't kill a fundamental force. You can't negotiate with entropy. You can't reason with gravity, but you can redirect it, channel it, use its own nature against itself. I understood this in a flash of insight that was both instantaneous and eternal. The walker pulled people backward by showing them the illusion of forward progress, by revealing that all movement was circular, that every step forward was ultimately a step back to where you started. But what if you removed the illusion? What if you showed people that forward movement was real, that progress had meaning, that time truly did flow in one direction? You couldn't do it from inside the fold. Here, all moments were equal, all directions were meaningless. But from outside, from a fixed point in linear time, you could anchor reality. You could hold the fold closed by believing, truly believing, that forward was real. It sounded insane, philosophical nonsense. The power of positive thinking applied to quantum physics. But I didn't have any better ideas. I focused on a single moment. Not the past, not the future, but now, this specific instant. October 20th, 2022, approximately 4:37 a.m., in the Crawford Mine in the Nantahala National Forest. I anchored myself to that moment, to that place, to that singular point in space-time. I thought about my first day as a ranger, the pride I'd felt putting on the uniform, the sense of purpose, of moving forward toward something meaningful. I thought about every hiker I'd helped, every lost person I'd found, every life I'd saved over 16 years. Forward progress. Real progress. Not circular, not illusory, but genuinely moving from worse to better, from lost to found, from danger to safety. I thought about Ellie Mitchell, who'd started hiking the Appalachian Trail in April, with a dream of reaching Maine by October. 2,190 miles of forward movement, of progress, of achieving something difficult and beautiful. I thought about Martinez, my partner, my friend, who believed in me even when I sounded crazy, who trusted me enough to let me walk into this mine alone. I thought about all the people who'd been caught in the walker's influence, who'd lost their ability to move forward. And I decided, no, I knew, that they deserved better. That humanity deserved better than to be trapped in an eternal cycle of backward motion. I held that thought, that belief, that certainty. And I pushed. I don't know how to describe what happened next. It was like pushing against a wall made of time itself, feeling it resist, feeling it push back. The walker wasn't evil, but it was strong. It had existed for as long as time had existed, and it would exist until time ended. Fighting it was like fighting the ocean or the wind, but I wasn't trying to destroy it. I was just trying to redirect it, to push the fold closed at this one specific point, to seal this one tear in reality. I pushed harder. The white light around me began to fracture, to split into component colors. Purple and blue and green and red. I could see the edges of the fold now, like looking at a piece of paper edge on. And I could see how thin they were, how little separated one moment from the next. I gathered everything I had, every memory of forward movement, every belief in progress, every hope for the future. And I used it as a wedge. I forced the edges of the fold together, compressing the gap, making the space between spaces smaller and smaller. The walker resisted. I felt its pull, its invitation to stop struggling and just accept the eternal cycle, to walk backward forever and find peace in the infinite loop. But I thought about those bones in the mining cart. I thought about the 40 people who would arrive at the spiritual retreat tomorrow if I failed. I thought about Ellie Mitchell's desperate eyes as she fought for one moment of control, and I pushed harder. The edges touched, the fold sealed, and I fell.